Thank you to my colleague who just gave a barn burner of a speech and I think a clinic to everybody in this House about what is wrong with this legislation, but I'll try and follow that. Before I do that, of course, I want to thank everybody that's participating in this Parliament today, but I also want to thank everybody that got us here, specifically my volunteers in Calgary Centre who did a really good job in making sure we have good representation continuing in Calgary Centre, and I'll do my utmost to them to make sure their opinions and their input is represented well in this House of Commons. My volunteers, of course, my family, my wife, I thank them all for everything they did to make sure we brought good government back to this side of the House and make sure we hold this government to account, because frankly, I think it's the same old government, even though they protest that they're new. It doesn't seem like any of their actions are new, which leads us to today's legislation. Bill C-3, carbon copy of Bill C-71. Now, I think that C-71 from the last Parliament, and that got stuck every step of the way because of exactly what we're talking about today. There's big holes in this legislation, and the government knows that. The government's put another bill on the table that we get to spend time talking about in this House of Commons when we really should be dealing with things that are much further up the rank in importance, frankly, the economy, frankly, the nation's debt, frankly, what we have to do to get projects built in this country again. But this government's obsessed with repeating the same mistakes they made before. I am a little surprised that this one comes up so high on their agenda, because I was on the Immigration Committee last time, and this one's back here again. We always thought that they were just trying to co-opt the party that used to be known as the New Democratic Party and kind of making sure they're spinning their wheels and continuing to gain their support. But evidently not, because I'm not sure that they need the 7 votes that are independent over here now, because they failed to maintain party status as a result of being that party's lapdog for the last 3.5 years. Now, it's embarrassing, quite frankly, but this is a game, and this game cannot continue. If you want good legislation, you've got to put good legislation forward. It's our job as His Majesty's loyal opposition to make sure we bring forth exactly what the problems we see in this bill are, and there are numerous problems. We've pointed them out for the last couple of years. You've got to change this. There's every expert on there. I mean, I've listened to speeches here from the members across the way today, and it's almost like they're living in an illusion. These are talking points. They're making things up. Here's your Liberal talking points. Just go out there and say this. It doesn't have to be the truth. It doesn't have to be based on reality. It just has to be your Liberal talking points. All presentation, absolutely zero substance about how this is going to affect the country. And I go through this in a number of ways. But what I'll say is this government and the Deputy Government House Leader on the other side, or Chief Government Whip or Deputy Government Whip, not sure what position he's been shuffled to at this point, I apologize. But effectively, what we're talking about here is a new government that is just a change of socks from the old government, if you will, at this point. This is disastrous. But it goes back a long way. But let me be clear about one thing. And one thing we've always been clear about on this side of the House is there was a gap in the actual admissibility of Canadians that the previous law had. And that was being dealt with. And I'll get through that later in my speech about how we were dealing with that, how the government and the Department of Immigration was dealing with that without this broad legislation coming in to suddenly change and upend the world. But Conservatives support fixing the issue of lost Canadians. I can't tell you how many times I've heard over on the other side, oh, Conservatives are opposed to this. Talking point, talking point, talking point. We absolutely support the issue of lost Canadians and making sure they become Canadian citizens. And that amounts to what we think there's around 20,000 Canadians that would be eligible Canadians that aren't right now because they fall through the cracks of what was the previous legislation said were Canadians. And Senator Yona Martin put forward a bill to address exactly that. It's called Bill S-245, the numbering they have over in the Senate. And it took a targeted approach to make sure those wrongs were righted and that these people did have the pathway for Canadian citizenship, and it was very clear. Bill C-3 goes way beyond fixing the holes, goes way beyond any sanity as far as a developed nation's immigration system and how it's supposed to make sure that we're bringing in people to this country, that we actually go through a process to get there. It's a sweeping overhaul and opens the door to abuse and weakens the very meaning of what it means to be a new Canadian. First, this bill eliminates the first-generation limit on citizenship for children born abroad. Under this bill, anyone born outside Canada to a Canadian parent, regardless of how many generations removed they are, can claim citizenship that if that parent spent 1,095 non-consecutive days in Canada. What does that mean? 1,095 days, well, you count the years that is, 3 years. 3 years effectively of maybe 3 months at a time, visiting family, whatever the case may be, and suddenly they're Canadian. That's less than 3 years, with no requirement for consecutive presence and no criminal background check. So effectively, you're getting around what is a very important and very highly considered international requirement for becoming a citizen in almost any country. Can we get an international background check on this? Can we get actually some police check? No, this person is automatically a Canadian citizen. And I don't know why that is a point of contention. Perhaps because breaking the system and then bringing it back in front of this House in 2 years' time, if they manage to push this bill through with some support, would be something that occupies this House's time. Some more and some more and some more, as opposed to dealing with the issues one time, fixing everything right, and getting it done. This bill does not provide a substantial connection to being Canadian. It's a loophole. It allows for multi-generational flow through citizenship to people who may never have lived in Canada, paid taxes here, or contributed to our society in any meaningful way. It is an open door saying you get to come to Canada because you have a long-term, long-ago connection that you have effectively been able to passport shop and come in here. And I'm going to go into what was the last Prime Minister's statement on this, about how we got here and what we're doing here. This is what people call the post-nation state. And the previous Prime Minister, and like I say, the new government seems like it's no different from the old government. Post-nation state refers to a perspective that acknowledges the diminishing importance of the nation state, Canada, and national identity in favor of global, regional, and local entities. It doesn't mean the end of nationalism, but rather a shift in focus and power dynamics where supranational organizations, multinational corporations, and globalized culture play increasingly significant roles. Now, what does that mean, supranational organizations? A supranational organization is like the United Nations, supranational, many nations. And you talk about multinational corporations. Well, what's a multinational corporation? Well, Brookfield would be a multinational corporation because of its holdings in many companies. So you get a government that maybe has some considerable expertise in these areas, getting a new, shiny new face that was both head of United Nations body and also head of Brookfield. So this is part of what we're drifting down here. But the whole thing about, you look at a transnational state, the post-national state, it suggests that national identity and loyalty are becoming less central as other forms of belonging and identity gain prominence. So if you're just going to have an open door to coming into Canada, effectively Canadian citizenship will mean less. And I don't think Canadian citizenship means less at all. You also have the whole post-national citizenship, the idea that citizenship is no longer solely defined by national borders, and that new forms of participation and belonging are emerging. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'm the great-grandchild of Canadian immigrants on one side, and the great-great-great-great-grandchild of Canadian immigrants on the other side. That makes me a Canadian, and I can tell you that my family has contributed to building this country, as every Canadian immigrant family has all the way along. And we build this country, and we grow this country. We're proud of this country. We're proud of the contributions of everybody that comes here and make sure that they build lives here, build families here, seek opportunities here, and develop this great country into what it could be. And to change that, where somebody can just say, I can have Canadian citizenship very easily, cheapens that work we've done cheapens everything we actually have accomplished in this country and what we build here for all generations. It is a loophole, as we've said, and it needs to be fixed. It needs to be addressed, because if it isn't addressed this time, it'll have to come back to the House and get addressed another time. And what do I mean by that? I mean that I've been here for this will be my third term as a parliamentarian, and I've seen a number of ministers of immigration, and it has been a disaster, an absolute disaster. Canada went from being a country that about 350,000 people maximum were new immigrants to Canada per year, to 1.2 million per year for 2 years. And that, but let me tell you, Mr. Speaker, I can tell you pretty clearly, that had no connection with the reduced health care that occurred across the country, with the reduced housing that occurred, and a housing crisis and a health care crisis. Those have no connection, because you can increase demand without necessarily increasing supply if you don't believe in actual economic rules. But all Canadians face this because of a more or less disastrous policy. And what happened as a result? You had the next minister come in. One minister got shuffled out. Next minister came in, and he reversed many of those policies. But there's an impact to that reversal. That reversal caused a whole bunch of people that had been given expectations about what the path to becoming a Canadian would be, and all of a sudden that changed. That changed whether you were in an institution, a post-secondary institution. That changed if you were just in your pathway to becoming a Canadian citizen. And all of a sudden new roadblocks were put in your way, delays were incurred, effectively you were pushed out of the queue. And that is not meeting expectations, because people build their lives, and it's an onerous process to become a Canadian citizen. Sometimes it takes 5 to 7 years. It's a long process. People have to be committed to it, and they want to become Canadians. It is a prize to actually get in here and contribute to this society. We are honored to have such great people come into our country and contribute here. But an open door doesn't make that worth its while. We have to close that broadly open door so we actually have a managed system like we used to have. Now, when I was on the Immigration Committee, I guarantee you, we received anonymous phone calls from bureaucrats talking about how badly the system was being run by the party on the other side, that there was no managerial control being used, effectively opening the doors, shortcutting a whole bunch of security processes in order to just push the number of people coming into Canada. And it's speculation, but one of the reasons is because they didn't want to actually see the GDP of Canada go down, because of their policies across the way were punitive to the economy. So if you're just increasing the number of people, of course there's a GDP associated with new people. But you look at the actual math, Mr. Speaker, you can see the math actually shows that our GDP per capita was not increasing. And there is a problem with that, because we were no longer meeting our growth as a country. Inflation was more than our GDP. That is a problem. It's a problem in any country. And you can't just paper over it by throwing a whole bunch more people into Canada. They're increasing one number without a quality increase. Now, I've always speculated, and I don't mind saying in this House of Commons, that the reason this is such a mess, the Liberals, I think, intentionally make a mess of this file, is because they've got a large constituency that profits from the middle of the immigration mess. They've got all kinds of consultants, and I think that one of their previous ministers of immigration was actually from that very constituency, the ones that actually make money from legal representation, consulting, everything else. And of course, billions of dollars of taxpayer money goes off the table for what is an awful, very long process of getting through Canadian citizenship. Very big constituency, and I know my colleagues on the other side of the House profit from that because they collect money from it. It is a bit of an aberration. But let's not forget something here. The first generation limit was introduced in 2009. It was a response to the 2006 Lebanon crisis, where Canada spent $94 million evacuating 15,000 Canadians of convenience, as they were called at the time. People who held citizenship but had little or no connection to Canada. And as much as I see the other side of the House, that they have no hesitancy to run up the numbers in Canada, $94 million is $94 million. And we can't repeat that again. We've got to make sure that the people that we're actually helping across the world when there are actual conflagrations like there are all the time, and we're expecting more and more, that those people are actually Canadians and actually will continue to contribute to our society going forward. McGill political professor Daniel Balan put it, Canadians living abroad sometimes can be a burden for the government in the sense that if we need to evacuate them during an armed conflict, or if they come back to the country to seek health care and so forth, that's part and parcel of being Canadian. And it's just not open to everybody all around the world. We've got to make sure we understand what it means to be Canadian, the value of a Canadian citizenship. Now, let me be fair. We support, again, the concept of restoring the citizenship of lost Canadians. We support, clearly, treating adopted children the same as biological children when it comes to citizenship. But these provisions were largely addressed, again, in Senator Martin's Bill S-245. They do not justify the massive overreach in this Bill C-3, nor in Bill C-71. This is something that continues. I'll go through a few quotes here on the commitment we talk about. Introducing tens of thousands of new Canadians without a robust integration plan is reckless. Our social infrastructure is buckling and healthcare is under severe pressure. The lack of a clear strategy for accommodating this potential population surge only heightens concerns. What's the surge we're talking about here? Well, we think there's about 115,000 people that would immediately qualify over the first 5 years of this program, and then continuing all the way through, because once you've got connection to Canada, your children do, et cetera, children's children. So this is something that's going to continue to escalate until it's addressed and until it's actually amended. And in doing our job here, we look at making sure that that is the case. But there's also logistical factors. This is going to cost $20 million plus of just administration per year as these come through our immigration IRCC department. So again, the government not understanding the numbers, even though the Parliamentary Budget Office has clearly put the numbers on the plate for them, they won't even quote the numbers about how many people this is going to affect. This is just, ignoring what is actually happening out there. They do have some modeling, they do have some clarity that they're being provided on this, and they don't want to see that. Now, I'm suggesting that maybe they're doing that for a reason. They're actually putting some canards out here to make sure that there is some debate that kind of continues to spend time in this House of Commons, as opposed to coming up with a real bill here that actually wants to get things done. Now, this also arose, and I'm not sure I have much time, Mr. Speaker, but it does come from a court ruling, a superior court ruling in Ontario. Now, people don't really know that, but Superior Court is a lower court ruling. It's not the Supreme Court, as one of my colleagues on the other side said this morning. It was appealable. It wasn't a great decision because it's already dealt with. These lost Canadians, although it's not in law, there is a process where the Minister of Immigration, and one of the colleagues on the side actually told that this is how this is dealt with currently. The Minister of Immigration can actually deal with these lost Canadians very easily in his current powers to overwrite that, and he knows that, and the government knows that, but they won't admit that. And that's the problem here, is that the government's doing something here where it's already got tools to address it, and it's widening the whole approach to this to make sure that we're doing something that most Canadians would say, what are you doing? What are you doing? And why are you doing it? Because it effectively says we're opening the door here for all acts and purposes for the foreseeable future and confusing everybody, but causing some problems that we're going to have to address one way or another. I'd like to close, Mr. Speaker, by just saying that Canadian citizenship is not just a passport, it's a privilege, a responsibility, and a bond to this country. And Bill C-3 weakens that bond. It allows people with minimal ties to Canada to claim the same rights and benefits as those who have lived, worked, and contributed here. Thank you.
Great speech.
Questions and comments? Question commentaire.
The honourable member for Hamilton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It will be a big honor for me to attend a citizenship ceremony in my riding Hamilton Center on Canada Day. And definitely I will welcome lots of my new citizens and my fellow citizens. And I have my question towards my honorable member on the opposite side, that when he would like to see this legislation into the committee. Thank you.
The honourable member for Calgary Centre.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I welcome my colleague to this House of Commons. And I've already, as I told him in my speech, I've already been in committee looking at this bill. I would like it to see it go to committee once it has the proper amendments put into it that actually present it as if it's something that we could debate at committee, that we could actually discuss the pros and cons of it. If I actually made some suggestions here that would get it to committee very quickly, I would say, and it's a government that's very good at copying previous legislation, why don't you just copy the previous S-245 and it'll solve the most immediate problems that you see as problems without opening a great swath that Canadians will not support. So thank you.
Question et commentaire, l'honorable député de Montcalm.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Alors, le discours du collègue de Calgary Centre s'inscrit dans la critique de la gestion erratique du gouvernement quant à l'immigration. Le Bloc québécois a posé des centaines de questions à ce sujet-là, qu'on pense au chemin Roxham, qu'on pense à l'initiative du siècle et ses cibles de 500 000 par année. Toutefois, il y a un jugement de cour. On doit répondre à ce jugement de cour. Dois-je comprendre du discours du collègue, puisqu'il parlait de lacunes inacceptables, que si le gouvernement conservateur était au pouvoir, il irait en appel du jugement de la Cour supérieure, et si oui, sur quelle base?
The honourable member for Calgary Centre.
Je remercie mon collègue pour la question, mais la Cour supérieure de l'Ontario a décidé, un juge a décidé que la loi existante n'est pas constitutionnelle, mais c'est une loi de Cour supérieure. Mais d'après moi, je pense que peut-être on a besoin d'entendre les autres opinions des juges qui ont décidé des enjeux constitutionnels après ça. Pas seulement un juge d'une cour supérieure à Ontario, mais peut-être des autres juges qui sont plus au courant des lois constitutionnelles qu'un juge au Cour supérieure de l'Ontario. Merci.
Questions, comments? The honourable member for Edmonton West.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague from Calgary Centre for his wonderful speech today. We've heard repeatedly, both inside this House and outside, how the Liberal government has broken the immigration system, not just Canadians' trust, but our ability to serve new Canadians. Through my office, I found out initial or extension of work permits has gone from 60 days to 210 days to get done. Spousal applications for people already here in Canada used to be 1 year, now service standard is about 3 years. Family reunification is now over 4 years. I'm wondering if the colleague would comment on the changes government's making without even knowing how many new people will be affected before and how it's going to affect the current wait times.
The honourable member for Calgary Centre.
It's a great question from my colleague from West Edmonton Mall. And it is something that I have an office in Calgary that's well known for its casework in immigration. And that casework in immigration is becoming more and more and more backlogged. And speculation on that is that the government is actually, pardon my phrase here, ragging the puck so that they don't have to deal with these issues. They can actually just drag things out and hopefully people will eventually get the hint and move on. And because there is very few ways they can deal with the amount of excess files they have at this point in time. And I think it's going to continue to be that way. I think they're going to continue to bluster and not be able to meet their own targets as far as how they're going to meet the timelines. Those timelines are being expected timelines are being extended all the time, and they're outside their targeted guidelines repeatedly. And this is something MPs, members of Parliament, have to continue to give them feedback on, and it's not.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Winnipeg North.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Here's the reality of the situation. When Pierre Poilievre sat around the Conservative caucus with Stephen Harper, they actually canceled the ability of someone to sponsor a mother, a father, or a grandparent. They canceled it, didn't allow you to do that. They also hit the delete button on the employment skilled worker program, literally deleting hundreds of thousands of people that were in the system, even though they spent thousands of dollars individually to get into the system. He makes reference to the waiting time for marriages, which is not 3 years, but I can tell him during Stephen Harper, it got up to 6 years. Mr. Speaker, if you provided me the time, I could assure you the immigration system today is better, and we finally have a new Prime Minister that is committed not only to improve the system, but to ensure the long-term stability of the program.
The honourable member for Calgary Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That member continually. 100% factual. May I? Thank you. That member continually, brings up what happened 15 years ago as if. And then he spouts it off as if it's actually fact. He talks about reality. I'm not sure that member recognizes reality. He talks about cancel and delete, and yet you talk about the number of Canadians that were brought in during the Stephen Harper years. It increased substantially, and that member doesn't really seem to want to grasp that. Every government has challenges in this file. Until the Justin Trudeau government, our immigration system was renowned as professional around the world. It no longer is, for a reason. They messed it up.
Question et commentaire, l'honorable député de Jonquière.
Je suis d'accord sur une chose. Oui, je suis d'accord sur une chose avec mon collègue. Effectivement, sous le gouvernement Trudeau, il y a eu des dérives en matière de migration, et c'est le Québec qui en a surtout fait les frais. La majorité des migrants temporaires qui sont rentrés sur le territoire puis qui ont créé une pression, ils sont arrivés au Québec, et il y a un passé dû considérable de la part du gouvernement fédéral envers le Québec, et ces argents-là, on ne les reverra pas. Mais on est devant un projet de loi qui, somme toute, est assez consensuel. Je me demande pourquoi, on a eu ces débats-là à la législature passée, je me demande pourquoi mes collègues conservateurs s'entêtent à freiner l'adoption de ce projet de loi.
The honourable member for Calgary Centre.
Well, I apologize to my colleague because I was going to respond in French, but when he used the word stubborn, I think I'm going to have to respond in English. Our job here is His Majesty's loyal opposition. Mr. Speaker, you know that. And there are gross holes in this legislation, and he knows that. And he knows what happened at Roxham Road. And he knows how the Quebec government had to twist the federal government's arms after 3 years of Roxham Road in order to stop the flow of people who are just taking advantage of that slippage. Where the border isn't the border is where there's an office where the border. That's ridiculous. That's a judge that doesn't know what he's doing. That's a government that doesn't know how to address a dumb situation. Something we need to address here going forward very clearly is proper legislation. And this is anything but proper legislation. So I don't think it's stubborn for us to do the work Canadians expect of us in order to get good legislation passed in this House. Thank you.
Questions and comments? Question et commentaire. 30 seconds to the honourable member for Saskatoon West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a quick question. We've been unable to get a number from the government today about how many people this might impact. And I guess my question is, we have the PBO number. It was 115,000 people, so it's at least that many people. It could be more. What are the ways that many new citizens might impact Canada when it comes to the bureaucracy the work that needs to be done in the bureaucracy, and the cost to Canadians on things like old age security and other things?
The honourable member for Calgary Centre.
Well, I thank my colleague for the question, and I think he asked me that question because I'm often focused on the this country's economy. And it's the number that the PBO came up with is about $20.4 million per year additional administration costs to get this program across, if it's approved in its way. And that escalates going forward, of course. That means more cost to Canadians. But it's also, think about that, as you continue down children upon children upon children. Eventually, we're going to have to deal with this sooner the better. Thank you very much.
Resuming debate, reprise du débat, the honourable member.